Okay, let's finish the back of this one. I'm going to snip the really long yarn threads at the back just so they don't get caught up in anything. You don't have to be too pedantic, just the odd stray one is fine. Grab your pins and we're just sort of roughly going to pin the extra fabric over to the back. And then you want to sort of fold the corners kind of a bit like wrapping a present, so they sit as flat as possible. You don't want too much bulk. It'll depend on the shape of your punch needle piece too. If it's round, you'll probably need to sort of cut some little V's, inverted V's out to help shape it. Okay, and have a look from the front, make sure it's looking good. And then you're going to thread a large-eyed tapestry needle, or sometimes a knitting needle. Not the end. I've got far too much here. I don't know why I was thinking about starting with a length that long. I would advise doing about half that because I'm going to get tangled. So I'm going to go under the monk's cloth and just hide that knot under there. Come up very close to the punch needle thread. Now you notice when I'm doing this, I'm holding it quite tightly either side every stitch I do. This is because you don't want to accidentally pull out any punch needle stitches when you're doing this. So you're basically doing a whip stitch just over the very edge. Quite carefully, this is a long process. So you're just going over to make a nice rounded edge, and this will take probably a couple of hours nearly to do this, but it is worth it and it looks really good, and it's just a case of going over and over and over. But you can see how I'm holding it either side, and I am being quite careful where I put the needle so that I'm not accidentally going to pull out an existing stitch there. If you couldn't be bothered doing this, you could just do the last step, which is we're going to sew some felt on the back, and you could probably get away without doing this, but it does make a lovely finished edge. Okay, so I think you've got the hang of that. So I'll see you in a couple of hours when you've finished yours, and we'll cut to the next step. Right, so here we are. We've whip stitched all the way around. It's looking pretty good. So you can see the edge there, how nice and neat it is. Now I'm just going to cut some excess fabric away. You could probably cut more if you wanted to. You could even tack this down with cotton, tack this edge down if you want to, but I find that the felt backing hides a multitude of sins and I just get lazy. So I just take off just the main bulky corners. Right, now we're going to back it with felt. I've sort of vaguely cut out the shape, but you'll see as I pin it on, I'm going to just trim the felt into shape. I find this an easy way to do it than trying to get the shape exactly right to begin with. So you're just going to pin it on. So the felt's just going to overlap the edge so you don't see any of the monk's cloth showing. So tuck in your corners again, sort of flatten them out as best you can. Give a little trim if you need to. As you can see, I just like to wing it, and it normally works out okay. Felt's quite forgiving because you can stretch it a bit. If you cut a little bit too short, you can give it a bit of a stretch. So it's great to use as backing. You can use something else as a backing. You can use whatever you've got. You don't really see it. And sometimes having a slightly heavier backing can actually stabilize your punch needle and make it sit nice and flat. Right, nearly there now. Okay. So now I have already threaded up the needle. I've got just cotton, sewing cotton. I've got two strands there to make it nice and strong. And I'm hoping you can see this. Now I'm doing a blanket stitch to just stitch around the edge of the felt. If you prefer whip stitch, which is a lot easier and a little less fiddly, that would work as well. You're not really going to see it. I just quite like blanket stitch. I find it very satisfying. And so you are just catching the edge where you've just whip stitched in the yarn. You are just sort of popping your needle in through that too, so that your felt's going to sit on top of that edge nicely. And yeah, and you carry on, and you've probably got a good hour of doing this as well. If you want to be a bit sneaky, and sometimes I do, you could use fabric glue. You could glue just your felt, put it on, and then sit some heavy books on it. I've totally cheated and done that too. You just have to be aware of what glue you're using, and it can sometimes make it a bit stiffer, which is actually good sometimes for shapes, but at your own risk. Test the glue first, so you're always safer with a bit of hand sewing. I'm just trimming as I go here because it's overlapping a bit and I don't want you to be able to see it from the front. Okay, so carry on around the corner and the whole way around. You can see how nice and neat that is. And oh, voila, there's the whole thing done. Look at that. Now on the back, I just put two little hooks. I would just sew like two little rings on there, but I haven't got any at the moment, so we just have to guess that. And you're done. Quick trim at the end if you want to. Although once you start, you won't stop, and voila, one punch needle finished.